Okay, cultural factors. This is actually super interesting, depending on how much of a design nerd you are. But like the influence of cultural factors on design and how design changes around the world can be seen everywhere. Like it can be right from like if you go to different McDonald's around the world, there'll be different products that are sold, and they'll even have different names depending on where you are. Um, because they want to appeal to like the demographics in those countries, and they found that there's different tastes and all that kind of thing. So that alone means that there's a requirement for different products. Now some products just have different names, but it's the same product just because that name is a more familiar sound to the language that's used in that country. Now, a really interesting example is traffic light colors. Now, you might think this sounds like a really boring example. Maybe it is, who knows? I think it's fair to say, without wanting to jump to crude generalizations, but I think it's safe to say that for us in Hong Kong, we would recognize red as meaning stop, green as meaning go, and then orange, the sort of mid-tone, as meaning kind of like get ready either way, that something's going to happen, whether it's stop or go. Now, what's super interesting is that in Japan, their green light is actually more sort of like a blue-green. And that's actually partly because of the language that's used and the differences in language around the world. Now, it's like really weird to get your head around because the word for green is actually the word for blue in Japan, if I understand that correctly. And you're welcome to criticize me and say I'm wrong on that. But I've linked to the 99% Invisible article there where you can either listen or read about it because it's super interesting. So the result of that is with the sort of international standardization of traffic light colors, green in Japanese actually means it's kind of like a blue color. So what they've had to go for is this sort of like an in-between. It's like a sort of, it's kind of like, there's a slang term, bleen, which is sort of like, is it blue or green? It's like a sort of joint mixture of the two. So it's kind of weird. Like next time you go to Japan, like just have a look at the traffic lights. You might notice that the green color is actually slightly different. Now, there's all sorts of other cultural differences as well, which I find really interesting. Like, I mean, we're all in Hong Kong. Like, we see buildings with holes in them a lot. Like, this is nothing unusual in Hong Kong. So some of you will be much more familiar with this than I am, but my understanding of it is that this is to do with feng shui or feng shui, depending on like your pronunciation of the Chinese language. But yeah, and from my very, very limited ignorant understanding of it, is to allow energy to pass through the building and to allow allow a dragon, so the dragon energy to be able to pass from the hills to the water and then back again. So it's a way of just allowing these energies to pass through the building. Now, that is something that is pretty unique to Hong Kong. Like if you built in London, if you built a block of apartments like that, right in the middle of London, chances are people would sort of look at that and think that's an interesting architectural choice. I wonder why they left a hole in the middle. Other people might look at it and think like they could have just put more apartments there. Why is there a hole there? Whereas in Hong Kong, people don't question it. So those are sort of cultural differences that people have to be aware of here. And there's actually a lot of these things around in Hong Kong. Like a lot of feng shui is like applied to buildings, much more than we realize. Another one is left hand drive, right hand drive. If you go to the United States, the cars and the driver sits on the left. In Hong Kong, Japan, UK, can't remember where else. A surprising number of countries, we have what's called right-hand drive, so we sit on the right-hand side of the car. Now, again, you think, how on earth does this happen? This goes back to I won't tell you about it now, but it's a very, very old, historical story as to why some countries drive on the left, some countries drive on the right. Again, you can learn about it on 99PI if you're interested. But yeah, like if you're a car manufacturer and you suddenly only release cars left-hand drive, that would immediately exclude you from, I can't remember what the percentage is, but it might exclude you from like 40% of the world's countries that would not be able to use your car. Interestingly, there's only been 2 countries in the world that have, in modern times, have undergone a switch from right to left-hand drive, is my understanding, is Sweden and Samoa, because Samoa, they realized that Japan has a massive second-hand car market, and they realized that they could import loads and loads of, say, Toyotas quite cheaply compared to other car brands Japanese cars are right-hand drive, so they're like, okay, this is going to benefit the economy massively, right? Sorry guys, we need to switch roadsides, and so literally they just had to undergo this transition. And what's amazing, when Sweden underwent the transition from being right to left-hand drive, apparently there was not a single accident for the first like month or something like that. Again, don't quote me on that, but like that's my limited understanding. Again, see 99pi for all the details on there. This I find really funny. This GIF here, like this from Bangkok. Some of you might have been there. Some of you might have seen this market, but I think this is such a great example of like cultural differences around the world. The fact that like, you know, there's a market that sits over the railway tracks, and then these people will literally there you go, as soon as the train's gone past, they pull their canopies back over again, and the market will restart. I find it absolutely amazing because from my point of view, like my very, very sort of health and safety conscious UK like conditioning, I look at that and I'm like, what? That's crazy. They've got like literally putting products next to the track, so the wheel will go right past the product, and people are just squatting next to the train. Whereas for someone who has grown up in that environment, they may well see that as just being completely normal, a bit like holes in buildings. Like you may not even question, a bit like traffic lights being blue and not green. A bit like having right-hand drive or left-hand drive, especially if you've never left that country. So that's why for us as designers, it's so important for us to actually get out there and look and see and travel to places as well, so we better understand the world that we're designing for.